Alex Bregman's market seems to be moving right along. He has a confirmed 6-year offer on the table from a team other than the Houston Astros. No surprise there. We'll see where he ultimately goes. That and more ahead next here at the Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys taking the time and joining us late on a Friday evening. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you enjoy covering the entire MLB right along with us. We'll be sure to keep you guys up to date on all the latest from MLB's Hot Stove during the offseason, throughout spring training, and yes, we will be live every single night throughout the regular season as well. Be sure to join us here. Hit that subscribe. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. But our top story tonight is Alex Bregman's market is certainly very crystal clear right now. We know where pretty much every team stands as far as how committed they are to bringing him in. I would expect this thing to get done fairly quickly. We're talking sometime in the next couple of days here. We already know where the Houston Astros are. They want to keep him right at that 6 for 156. That is the one player they're willing to exceed the tax threshold in order to sign. We'll see if they can get that one done. But it'll be on a team-friendly contract. I believe the AAV on that contract is something around $26 million. That's not exactly what Alex Bregman was looking at coming into the offseason. He was hoping to get a deal in the neighborhood of, say, $30 million a year for, say, 7 years. Well, we already know what the market really is as far as the rest of the teams in the league. There's about 5 teams that are really chasing him right now. Of course, the Astros have that standing offer out there to him. We know the Red Sox have mixed feelings in that front office. While they're interested in Bregman, it seems they've kind of moved on to another fit here. Now, I do still see multiple reports out there, Bob Nightingale included, that still say that they are one of the finalists there for Bregman, and I'm sure they're still discussing things there. But I think the Red Sox have already made up their mind that they're not willing to commit the long-term dollars necessary to sign him. I think the only way he signs there in Boston at this point is on a short-term deal, and he's made it very clear he's not looking to do that. The other teams in this race are going to be the Detroit Tigers, who also have taken kind of a step back in these negotiations with their unwillingness to spend on a long-term deal, hesitation from past bad deals. We've covered this at length. Javi Baez, Jordan Zimmerman, Miguel Cabrera, all those deals, especially in the back half of Miguel Cabrera's deal, ultimately did not go well. And I think they're very hesitant to do so once again on a player of this caliber. I'm sure they're very comfortable doing a high average annual value contract for a short-term deal, but I don't know if that's necessarily, again, the deal Bregman is looking for. That leaves you with 2 other teams here. One is the Chicago Cubs. They are said to be the most aggressive team after him. Curious to see if they can get this one across the finish line. They make the trade to bring in Kyle Tucker. But however, the rest of this lineup, though, hasn't really been addressed. To me, they still need another aircraft carrier type of offensive piece here. Bregman would symbolize that. They are in the running for a Dylan Cease type of acquisition as well, as no matter how unlikely that may be, seems like they are certainly all in on 2025. And that's kind of the one team I'm keeping an eye on throughout the regular season. If they're going to have some changeover in that front office, I think there's an organizational mandate to try to win in 25, especially with the amount of money they gave Craig Counsell. The owner there, Ricketts, was expecting more bang for his buck, and ultimately hasn't gotten it. I think there's a lot of pressure right now on that front office and that manager to be able to get this team in the right direction. So we'll see what the Cubs ultimately do. But as far as Bregman is concerned, I wouldn't be surprised if they were the most aggressive team and offered him the most when it's all said and done. The other team is the Toronto Blue Jays. They've been in on pretty much every big free agent this offseason and still remain in on every single big free agent that's still out there. Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Jack Flaherty, among others. I wouldn't be surprised if they added at least one of those names that I just mentioned. They get the deal done for Scherzer. They bring in Santander, Hoffman. They make the trade for Jimenez. It's been a decent offseason after what started out absolutely abysmal for them. Missing on Fried, missing on Burns, missing on Sasaki, missing on Soto. I'm sure I'm missing a few other guys that they missed on so far, but shows you where the Jays have really fallen off. We saw the Giants struggle for years getting their top targets to ultimately sign there. Now with Buster Posey in charge, Farhan Zaidi out, they've started to make some progress getting the guys that they want. They get Willie Adames before they even get to the winter meetings, and now they get some respectability by bringing in Justin Verlander. We'll see what they do next year with that newfound stance in that front office there. See if Buster Posey can finally lure one of the top flight free agents there and really get this thing going in the right direction there for San Francisco. Blue Jays could be headed in a very similar direction if they don't get that extension done with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. There's not a player on the board that's going to have a bigger impact to the Jays than Vlad. I mean, he has everything to that team because if they don't get him signed to the extension, you're going to hear nothing about trade rumors for Vlad. Where is he going to go in the offseason? That's just a headache they should not be having to deal with. If there's a real chance that he's going to leave in free agency, I think at the trade deadline, I would look to try to trade him and see what you could get. Hopefully you're able to re-sign him. Absolutely. That's option A, B, and C. But ultimately, you have to be able to recoup some assets here. You look at Shohei Ohtani and how that tenure ended out there with the Los Angeles Angels, how that ultimately was complete organizational malpractice for basically the final 2 years of Shohei's career there. And especially the final year was just a complete masterclass in how not to run a baseball team. But looking at the Jays, if they see the writing on the wall that Vlad wants out, unless they're absolutely one of the favorites to get to the World Series, they have to consider trading him at that point. I think they're going to be out of contention the way their current roster is set up, but they certainly have done a nice job rebounding from what was a tough start to their offseason. Now, if they somehow get that extension done with Vlad, automatic A of an offseason for me, no matter what else they might have been able to do. Bringing in Alex Bregman certainly would help them and give them some insurance if they lose Bo Bichette in free agency next year as well. Then, of course, Pete Alonso. If Vlad does leave, he obviously would be insurance over there at first base to a lesser degree, obviously. Vlad obviously will play third base this year if they did sign a Pete Alonso, but a lot of irons right now there in Toronto. But talking about the Cubs and the Blue Jays, as far as Alex Bregman is concerned, both of those two teams are the teams that are considered to have long-term contracts on the table for Alex Bregman. Their industry does believe that the 6-year offer might be coming from the Toronto Blue Jays, a team that he may not necessarily want to play in the market of. The other rumors on that 6-year deal is that there's an opt-out after the first year. So we'll see what the offer ultimately turns out to be, what the number he ultimately signs for, where he goes. But I would say Bregman's signing is going to be happening very, very quickly. I think if he was going to go back to Houston, I think he would have already done it at this point. I just don't think Houston's going to budge off their price. I think if he does take a deal, getting a long-term deal with a team that he doesn't necessarily like, say if it is Toronto, say the contract is, say, 6 for $185, something like that, with an opt-out after the first year. Say the opt-out is that first-year salary, say $35-ish million. That'd be an incredible 1-year salary for Bregman to reestablish himself as a free agent once again. Couple of down years offensively, going to Toronto, showing that his bat plays up there would be a good thing for him. But maybe he just wants the long-term security and stays with that 6-year offer. Now, again, this doesn't mean that he's going to Toronto, doesn't mean that he's going to sign for 6 years, doesn't mean that he's going to take the opt-out. All it means is he has more options on the table than what was thought of, say, a month ago. I think we pretty much know where Bregman's offers pretty much stand right now. We know the Tigers short-term deal opt-outs. We know the Red Sox, not really sure if they even want to be in there for Bregman. If they are, probably a short-term deal. We know the Astros, 6 for $156. The two wild cards there. Now we're getting even more information on what the offer could be. And one of those offers apparently is a 6-year deal with an opt-out after the first year. Sounds like that total value of that contract is definitely higher than that Houston Astros offer. But will he be willing to go to a market that he's not necessarily crazy about playing in remains the big question there. Alrighty, let's check in with some of these comments here. Welcome in, Rafe. You were first today. Yes, you were. Holly, welcome in. Sean, Rod, appreciate you joining us once again. Man, I was hoping you'd be here. So all right. Is Jim Bowden right when he said the Cubs are the most aggressive team on Bregman? I believe so. I think they are trying to improve this team for 2025. I think the Blue Jays would have to be in that same conversation, though. I don't think you could say one without the other at this point. I'm sure Houston would love to bring him back at that team-friendly deal, but they're not exactly trying to convince him to take that low-cost or the team-friendly deal They're just going to leave it on the table and just say, hey, it's there if you want it. It's, if you don't want it, go ahead, sign elsewhere. We're going ahead and making plans for the 25 season with and without you. So whichever way you want to go, Alex, we'll be happy with. If you want to come back, you'll be the one player we'll be willing to exceed the tax threshold for. Otherwise, we're happy with where our team currently sits. Kind of like that position if I'm a Houston Astros fan. Not that we're losing Bregman if I was an Astros fan, but that we're sticking to our principles here. We're not necessarily willing to go above and beyond a price that we have set for ourselves. But at the same time, you still need more talent on that roster. You have long-term questions about what the rotation is going to look like, what the outfield mix is going to stand or have in it. And as far as that prospect pool, the Astros are nowhere near the top of the league anymore. And making the trade they did with Kyle Tucker ultimately did extend their window here as far as a contending team for, say, at least a playoff spot, maybe even the division. But one would say that Kyle Tucker is certainly the better piece, but they wouldn't necessarily be a better team with the top-end talent by moving on from Kyle Tucker. They might be better in the long run, but Kyle Tucker is a better piece for 2025 than the long-term future. So we'll see what Houston ultimately does if they get Bregman there. But something to kind of keep an eye on over the next couple of days is where Bregman ultimately signs. Rod, Boras is annoying, to some degree. I mean, all agents to me are somewhat annoying in all levels. Boras, I get it, does great on fans and front offices, but he does one thing really well. He represents his players and usually gets the contracts that the player is looking for, if not better than that. Now, of course, over the last couple of years, he's gotten a lot of fire based on how things worked out for Snell and Montgomery. I would look at Snell and say that's an absolute victory lap for Scott Boras. Got a 2-year deal with an opt-out after the first year for Blake Snell. Ultimately, the first half was a little rocky for Snell, but really showed out in the second half of the year. He parlayed that into an absolutely fantastic contract with the LA Dodgers. Now, as far as Montgomery, obviously that didn't work out. His numbers in Arizona were terrible, and looks like he'll be traded before the start of the season. We'll see where he ultimately does go, but I would not expect him to break camp with the Diamondbacks pitching staff. Let's see here. Roddy needs to get Alonso and Bregman to sign very soon. Again, I expect Bregman to sign here in the next probably 72 hours. I would say Alonso is within the next week or so after that. I would say before spring training, both guys will be off the board. Rafe, Rangers have gotten trade interest in Tavares. Make it happen. He's not going to be that good, and we always keep below average players for way too long. Yes and no. He is very good defensively. One of the better defensive center fielders in the league. If you're going to trade him away, what are you willing to replace him with? I know one of the popular guys in the free agent market is a guy like Michael Taylor or a guy like Kevin Pillar. Both of those guys aren't necessarily, lighting the world on fire, and that's a lot of risk to put on Evan Carter's shoulders, who's had a couple of different back injuries in his career, and he's not even, 25 years old so far? That's a lot of pressure for Evan Carter. He's going to have to show out in spring training in order for me to move on from Leody Taveras. Now, say things work out, and Evan Carter can handle righties and lefties, and he's going to play every day in center field. Maybe making a move of Leody Taveras to a team that needs a center fielder right before the start of spring training. Usually we'll see a couple of flurry trades right before the start of the new league year anyway, or opening day anyway. But, maybe he could be in that batch of trades there. But if you make that trade at that point, you'd have to have somebody already in the clubhouse to take that fourth outfielder spot or acquire one via trade or hope one is still out there on the free agent market. I think if you wait to that point, none of those options that I just mentioned, Taylor, Pillar, would still be available. I think they'll at least have gotten camp invites from other clubs, and you might not have the ability to sign them. But I like your comment there as far as Taveras being a guy that you could dangle out there, maybe save yourself a little bit more money. Remember, they're still looking for a closer. They're still looking to save a little bit of that powder to have dry for the trade deadline and see if they can make some acquisitions at that point. And then, of course, as I mentioned, they're still looking for another innings eater in that rotation, like a Jordan Montgomery, among others. All right, let's see if we can catch up to some of these comments here. Mets did sign Nick Madrigal. I did see that one as well. Curious signing for them. I believe it was a 1-year, $1.325 million deal with $500 million in incentives in that deal. Kind of a utility player for me. I think this just gives them some competition for some of the young guys that are going to be coming up. I think he'll probably break camp with them at their major league level, but I don't think he's necessarily going to stay on that team throughout the season. I think this is a short-term answer for a veteran on this roster to break camp with, and I wouldn't rule out them possibly getting Pete Alonso to come back to the New York Mets. The more and more I hear about the New York Mets and their pursuit of Pete Alonso, the more they keep trying to pour cold water on how much he's going to earn. the more belief I have that the Mets are ultimately just posturing here and will ultimately raise their offer. We've already seen them raise their offer not once, but twice so far this week. They started the week at a 3-year deal with opt-outs anyway for $62 million. Now they've raised it twice anyway since then, from 3 for 62 to 3 for 66, and now for 3 for 70. I think Pete Alonso is looking for a 3 for 100. If they get somewhere to around 3 for 85, which I think is very possible here, he could very well return to the New York Mets. Jim Bowden anyway reported on MLB Network Radio. Detroit has the best Bregman offer, but he's not sure that that's where Alex wants to go. That kind of surprised me with the AJ Hinch connection. I mean, I think it would be a good spot for him as far as in Detroit. The question has always been the money. Now, maybe he's referring to the highest AAV, but I think their question there in Detroit is, are they willing to go long-term on that type of a deal or not? Rafe, Bregman is an Astro until he signs with another team, in my opinion. Possibly. I mean, he did just play for the Astros, but I think this is a race for the other teams to lose rather than it is a race for the Astros to win. What I mean by that, unless one of these other teams, or unless all these other teams just ultimately just don't give him the offer that he's looking for, then I think the Astros would then be the winner by default. He just has to settle for that offer. But I think it's pretty clear that the Blue Jays are going to have a better offer on the table. I think the Cubs are going to have a better offer on the table. Maybe if Bowden's right, maybe the Tigers have a better offer. But if he just wants to be a part of the Houston Astros and remain a member of the Houston Astros, he's going to have to come back at a team-friendly contract at a discount. So kind of keep that in mind with Bregman. This is his one big bite at the apple. So does he want to get the extra money? Does he want to play for a team that in a different city? What kind of things are important to him? Now, when you're talking about $26 million versus, say, $30 to $35 million over the course of 5-6 years, that's a whole lot of money, folks. So you can't exactly fault a player for trying to make the most at his one bite at the Big Apple here. So let's see here. Donnie, welcome in. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you joining us once again. Willard, Michael, appreciate you as well. You think Bregman will re-sign with the Astros? Possibly, Willard. I know you're an Astros fan, but we'll see if they can get that one across the finish line. Who do you think the Giants will sign next? Good question, Mike. I would say that the Giants are more looking at the trade market right now for a Doval, possibly. As far as a signing, maybe they go cheap at first base with an Anthony Rizzo. That'd be the one I'd be looking at there. But relief prices are so high, I'm sure they could get whatever price they wanted for Doval, as long as it was within reason anyway. So that's one name to kind of keep an eye on as far as trades as we get closer to the start of the spring training schedule here. Bregman to the Astros or Blue Jays. I think both are possible. Rafe, I don't know why I want to see Pete sign with San Francisco, not the Mets. I don't know why either, my friend. I would like to see him back with the Mets. I want to see them build up another super team here. I know the Dodgers are the preeminent favorite to win the World Series right now, at least on paper. I think more competition on the NL side from a team like the Mets, even though they still have a hole in that rotation to me, helping build out that lineup with Pete Alonso coming back would go a long way to helping keep this team in contention in that very difficult NL race there. Donnie Cohen is playing chicken with Pete and Boras. Kind of, but I think that more of this is posturing. We saw a couple of reports anyway yesterday that this might have been them getting ready to offer a legitimate contract to Pete Alonso, something much closer to what he's looking for. Maybe not everything, like the 3 for 100 or even a longer-term contract, but maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 for 80 could be coming here in the next couple of days. Tucker will be a Yankee next season, possibly Donnie. Pete probably signs with the Mets, but with opt-out starting next season. That's on the table right now. I think he would love to be a member of the New York Mets. He may have to take a team-friendly deal in order to get that done. Let's see here. Willard, I think the other reason Soto left the Yankees beside money, certain podcasts kept saying he needs Judge when I thought Soto saved the Yankees playoffs by hitting this home run. Bottom line, Soto delivered, but Judge didn't in the playoffs. Yes, I mean, I will say that as far as, Soto goes, he really rose to the occasion last year. But, the playoffs to me are always a small sample size. I don't really judge a player based off of their performance in the postseason when it's such a small, period of games. Now, over the course of, say, 50 to 100 games in the postseason, then we have a better track record, a better expectation of what a player can do once they get to October. But again, it's all small sample sizes. Just as those small sample sizes that got them up to the 50 games, they might have another small sample size where they're hitting 500 as they go into a series in the postseason. All of it, is just who's hot at the right time once you get to October. The NFL is kind of the same way. Basketball is about matchups more than anything else. Baseball is also about who's right and who's not once you get to the playoffs as well. Sean, you predicted that the Presley trade would happen during the Eagles game last week, and that's exactly what happened. Great job. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. I told you Presley was going to be happening fairly quickly at that time, and I'm expecting Bregman to do the same here in the next 72 hours. I'm expecting Bregman news to happen. I will give one programming note. I told you guys we'd be live every single night. I know tonight was very late for our live to start. I've got a lot of plans tomorrow night, but we will still have our live. It will be a much later live like this one, probably starting around 10:30, 11 o'clock. So kind of adjust your schedules accordingly. But we'll be starting about an hour, hour and a half to 2 hours later than usual. But we still have our daily MLB Hot Stove podcast, or YouTube video here at the Upside. So we're not going to miss anything. If Bregman does happen earlier in the day, I'll see if I can get on live earlier. But, I will definitely be live for you either way. We will always be here for you guys. Willard, do you think the Astros trade for anyone or sign besides Bregman? I think they're going to add at least one more outfielder. We've talked at length anyway about a couple of different outfielders they pursued this offseason. Anthony Santander ultimately goes to the Blue Jays. Profar goes to the Braves. Other names they've been connected to are Verdugo. They've been connected to Grichuk and a couple of guys via trade as well. But as far as Jorge Polanco was one of the other names as far as an infielder that they might have signed to play a little bit of outfield or move Paredes out there or Altuve. He ultimately signed with the Seattle Mariners. So we'll see where they ultimately go for an outfield assistance there. Rafe, Rangers should trade for Helsley and Victor Scott II. Victor being Tavares' placement. I don't necessarily like that trade too much, though. I would rather get some other pieces if I was trading Tavares there, and I don't think Tavares would go to St. Louis. I don't think there's a fit for him there in St. Louis. I think if St. Louis trades Helsley, it's going to be for a couple of prospects more than anything else. But as far as the comments there, as far as Tavares going out the door, I mean, I want to see what he looks like in spring training, first and foremost. If his bat looks like the Tavares that we saw in 23, then that's a player that you would be able to count on a lot more in this lineup. A player that could play both in righties and lefties. Bruce Bochy absolutely loves the guy. So I want to see how he looks like with that bat that they've been working on all offseason long, and by all accounts it looks improved. But I want to see it in game action. I want to see it in spring training. If things look still a little rough and Evan Carter looks good, he looks like he's healthy and can handle it, then I'd look to trade him right before the start of the season to kind of save a little bit of money there. Donnie Howell's being cheap. That's why he signed Goldie and not Alonso. I don't think that the Yankees were a great fit for Alonso anyway. I think that they're trying to go after Guerrero next year, and I think they were going to go after a short-term answer one way or the other. The only quote-unquote long-term answers to me would have been Christian Walker, would have been Cody Bellinger playing first instead of in the outfield, but instead they go with Goldschmidt over there at first base, giving them a guaranteed one-year option there at first, and then of course they have Bellinger in the outfield. Now, if they had somehow been able to get Kyle Tucker to go in there, I think Bellinger would have been the guy to go over there at first base. Then and only then, maybe they steer away from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next year in the offseason. But right now, I think they're one of the best teams that I would expect to be in the running for him. We'll see where he goes. Hal wants to stay under the Cohen threshold. Yes, he does. Next season, lots of money coming off the books. They have some coming off the books. I wouldn't say it's enough to necessarily clear the decks for them to add multiple top-level free agents, but I think they could add at least one big, aircraft carrier type, like a, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or a Kyle Tucker, but I don't think you're getting both of those guys. I think best-case scenario for Yankees next year is you get one of those two. Donnie, and next season, okay, Rafe, Goldie disrespect won't be tolerated, Donnie. That's funny. Let's see here, Rafe. Love Goldie signing, I do. Let's see here. Next season, lots of... Okay. Goldie in the clubhouse and helping Ben Rice out will be huge. Yes, but I think Rizzo is very good in the clubhouse as well. I'm not sure how big of an impact he's going to have on Ben Rice. To me, I think Ben Rice could be used as one of the pieces they trade for an impact bat at the trade deadline. So don't be surprised if you see him being the long-term piece that goes out the other way. Veterans presence, always good. I agree there. But again, he just had that in Rizzo. Rafe, Goldie used to be one of my faves. I would agree. His consistency is what really made him valuable, but his consistency has fallen off, and that's why he was available for only a one-year deal. I think if he's able to resurrect his career in New York, he might have another one-year deal, more lucrative, on the table. If it doesn't work out and he flames out there in New York, we might be seeing him out the door in Major League Baseball inside of the next year after this one. Judge on a saying on Goldie, just not to DFA DJ as well. Huh? So you're saying to DFA DJ LeMahieu. I don't get the comment there. Doesn't make sense to me for some reason. I don't know. It's 11 o'clock at night. I guess I'm just not seeing it right. But I get the point as far as wanting to DFA a guy like DJ LeMahieu, but it doesn't really save you any money. I think the only way they do something like that is if they're able to trade him off their roster to give themselves some financial flexibility. Mike, let's face it, with all the troubles in the world, it is really important what team Bregman and Alonso sign with. I guess talking baseball is a healthy outlet. Yeah, it is, Mike. We appreciate you. There's a lot of interesting headlines around the world, a lot of scary headlines around the world. I was talking with some coworkers today that I never would have thought would have been fearful for some things that are happening in the world, and I will just say that this is a nice place to come to not have to discuss those things, to not have to worry about those things. So I try not to encourage politics or religion or taxes or anything like that. The only tax conversation I want to hear in this is, hey, that's a no-tax state. This player might be interested in going there. That's the whole thing I want to hear about taxes. I don't want to hear a whole tax breakdown. I don't want to get into that. I don't want this to become a political channel. I want this to be purely about baseball, about the hot stove. I want to support all of our different fan bases that are out there. I want to discuss, transactions. The reason this network is named the Upside Sports Network is to talk about the things that can happen. What's the next trade on the horizon? What's the next signing? What does the team look like? What is, with the signing of, say, Bregman goes to the Cubs, what's the next step for them? What does their roster look like? What do they do in their rotation? What does this team, or what does the signing of Bregman mean for them in the, how do I rank this team? Where do they finish in the season? Do they make it to the wild card round? Do they get to the World Series? Do they win the World Series? What happens in 25? Do they sign him to a one-year deal or a 6-year deal with an opt-out of the first year? Do they sign him long-term? Do they sign Kyle Tucker in free agency next year? Do they make the trade for Dylan Cease before the start of the year? All of those things are things I would like to be talking about as far as the upside here. So just because, Bregman's not signed yet doesn't mean there's not plenty of things to still discuss just with one aspect of one specific transaction. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot of, ripples in the water, if you will, as far as, dominoes that will fall once Bregman goes. Most of the top free agents are already off the board. There's only a couple of guys left. One other news and note that I will mention from today. We got a little bit of an update anyway on Kyle Gibson and Andrew Heaney from John Paul Morosi on MLB Network today. Basically, he says Gibson is one of the most consistent starting pitchers over the last few years. He threw 169 innings last year. If you're looking for an innings-eating starter, maybe you wait until you get to spring training if there's an injury. But Kyle Gibson is still out there on the board. Now, is he going to get anywhere near the money of an Alex Cobb? Probably not. Alex Cobb, in case you're wondering, got about $15 million this offseason. I think Gibson could probably be had for around half of that. And you'd have at least somebody who gives you some length, an ERA around 4.5. It's not going to be anything spectacular, but for a number 5 guy in somebody's rotation like the Cincinnati Reds who just need somebody to soak up those innings when those young guys don't go deep into games, Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn type is your guy. The other one I mentioned there is Andrew Heaney. Morosi made the comment anyway that he's kind of the left-handed version of Kyle Gibson. I don't see that at all. The only way I see that as far as the ERA being very similar and the innings being very similar. Outside of that, couldn't be more different. One's right, one's left. Andrew Heaney has a lot more stuff, spin rate, all those kinds of things, strikeout potential. Gibson doesn't necessarily bring any of those things to the table. There are a few teams that could be touching base for Gibson and Heaney. He mentions the Minnesota Twins as one of the teams that could be looking at him, but we'll see where they go here. Rod, where will Verdugo end up? Good question. For me, I think he's a good left-handed bench bat. For me, I would love to see him go to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They need a little bit more offense there, and I think he'd be just the shot in the arm that outfield needs. Now, I still think they need more offense even than Verdugo, but that would be a nice signing for them. Let's see here. Try to catch up on a few of these comments here. You think he'd go into the Pirates? That's kind of what I was thinking there, Donnie. Another team for Verdugo, since you mentioned that one, Donnie, I'll go ahead and say, let's go with Seattle. They're looking for another bat. They spent about $3.5 million on Solano. They spent $7 and change on Polanco. The thinking has been maybe a JD Martinez or Justin Turner would go there, but maybe going after an Alex Verdugo would be a better option for them there in Seattle. They still need more offense. Verdugo can bring some of that offense. David, welcome back. Appreciate you joining us once again. Johnny, welcome in. Goldie in a lineup with Judge and Stanton will hit much better. I would agree. But I think the improvements that lineup has made as far as the overall, makeup of the team, from the rotation to the bullpen to the 1 through 9 order there, I think you're going to miss Soto. Absolutely, you're going to miss that aircraft carrier type. But you still have some good options there. I like the addition of Bellinger. I like the addition of Goldschmidt. But you're still missing that another aircraft carrier in the middle of that order. I wonder if they get that guy at the trade deadline, because for me, they're still missing one more impact bat, and I think they'll get it at the trade deadline. Because the Yankees are waiting to see where Murakami signs next year, possibly as well. I think Murakami has been mentioned as a favorite for the Yankees and Mets. I think he will end up in one of those two. I know you're probably looking more first base DH, but I think you could squeeze him into the outfield and left field and hide him there if you had to. But primarily first base DH is where he will play if he comes over to the States. But don't rule out teams that are looking for a left fielder as well, needing some more offense. Murakami could be the answer there as well. Rafe, I feel like every year we hear a major bat improvement stories for so many players that still disappoint. I know they're working with some new coach this year, but it still concerns me. Exactly. That's why, again, I still want to see him perform in spring training and see how his swing looks. If it still looks broken, obviously I'm going to be making a decision fairly quickly. If he looks like he's made strides and is still working on his craft, but if there's noticeable improvement, I'd have a lot more faith in that bat than I do right now. Donnie, Kyle Tucker to the Yankees next year. It's certainly a possibility. Johnny, why do you think the Pete Alonso's trade value went down so quickly? Maybe because of his agent and partially has declined? Yes and no. As far as his free agent value, he's not on the trade block. Obviously, he's not signed a deal yet with a team. But as far as where Pete Alonso will go, as far as the contract, I think I think he regrets not signing that long-term deal, the extension offer. But I still think he's going to do fairly well. Is he going to do as well as that extension? I don't think so at this point. I think the market is all but dried up around him. You got a couple of teams that are still in the running here. I know we've got the dark horse team, the Cincinnati Reds, we brought up yesterday. Again, an article floated them as an option today, and maybe the best option for him as far as a fit. But I think he ends up on one of the Mets, Blue Jays, or maybe a surprise team like the LA Angels. Rod, where will Bo end up next year? Dodgers, possibly, if they don't find a long-term answer there at short. But for me, they can play pretty much anybody they have on the roster there right now. They have like 5-6 guys who are capable of playing shortstop on that roster currently. I don't think they're necessarily going to break the bank for a Bo Bichette unless he absolutely goes supernova this year. Bo Bichette was terrible last year, well below league average. If he duplicates that performance, like I said, he could be anywhere from, say, a 3-year, $40 million deal. Hope he catch lightning in a bottle, see if he rebuilds his value. Or he could be all the way up to, say, a 8-year deal, 9-year deal, 10-year deal in the $280, $290 million range. Dodgers right now have a lot of money committed to that payroll, and I don't think they necessarily need to make an addition like Bo Bichette. But if he's an impact player like that, maybe they can get him at a huge deferred contract type of a deal. I wouldn't rule it out. Like I said, I'm not ruling out the Dodgers for anything right now after they've repeatedly told us we have no money, we have no room on the roster, there's no way we can get these things done. And then signing, trade. Like, come on, man. At a certain point, stop playing with us. And we just saw the interview with Brandon Gomes the other day anyway, where basically he said, yeah, we like the unpredictability. We like having our toes in literally every single thing. And as a GM, that's exactly what he should be doing. So we'll see what this team ultimately looks like. But they are on paper the favorites to win the series in 25. But again, still have to play the games. You think, Willard, you think Houston will surprise people because last season Astros had major hole at first base. Now they have a legit first baseman in Walker. They do, but now they have a hole in the outfield. That hole that they filled at first base, that's been a black hole there for about 2-3 years now, has now been filled. But that same black hole is now in the outfield there because they lost Kyle Tucker. They haven't improved or filled that spot yet. It remains to be seen who they bring in, and I think they've actually decreased their talent over there at third base. I like Paredes. I like him actually better than I do Bregman, but I would say Bregman, at least on paper, at least to me, is a little bit better player. I think Paredes could be a better player, but I know what I'm getting in Bregman. I think he's a little bit of a declining bat, but I still would rather have Bregman on that team than Paredes if I were a Houston Astros fan. Now, Paredes, I love the get here. I know they were trying to get him over there for first base last year at the trade deadline. He was their number one target along with Christian Walker. Now they've got both of those guys there. I don't think there's really a fit for Bregman. I think they're set, though, at both third and first with both those guys, and I think they're going to have productive careers there in Houston. I'm not saying they're bad signings or bad trades. I'm just saying it's going to be different than having a Bregman over there at third base. But that same black hole that they had over there at first base, again, is still in that outfield spot. They need to fill that hole before I say this is a complete team based off of what they just had a few months ago. The Yankees wanted to DFA DJ, but Judge said no and stopped it. Okay, that makes more sense. I didn't hear too much about that the DFAing of DJ. I didn't hear that one, but I'll take your word for that one. But for me, DJ LeMahieu doesn't bring a whole lot to the table anymore. I know they would love to get him off the roster to clear off his salary, but if he's Judge's boy, consider that just part of the contract for Aaron Judge, just the cost of doing business. Now, you're kind of limited financially because of that contract. They're trying to move on from Stroman as far as clearing the books a little bit. They're going to have to eat a little bit of that salary if they're going to trade him solo. If they don't want to eat some of that salary and just let it all off the books and have some money that they can go out there and use at the trade deadline, maybe they attach a prospect or two to get it done that way as well. Willard, plus Astros pitching staff and offense can go with anyone. I wouldn't say that. Offense, I would say a couple of years ago could hang with anybody. I love Alvarez. Altuve is a good player. Not as good as he was in his prime. They don't have Bregman anymore. They don't have Tucker in this lineup anymore. I like the addition of Christian Walker. You're going to have another year of Diaz behind the plate. Pena's okay at short. He's been good one year, bad the next. A lot more question marks. And then the outfield, nothing but question marks out there. I would say their offense is a work in progress. As far as the pitching staff, they aren't even all healthy yet. And even when they are healthy, I'm not sure how good they are. I'm not sure where they stack up to the Yankees. I'm not sure where they stack up to the Rangers or the Mariners or any of these other teams, or even the Guardians on the AL side. The Red Sox have improved their rotation as well. I will say Framber is a very good number one. A little bit emotional for me as a number one, but still a number one on that roster. You got Hunter Brown, who really took some strides last year and could be a number one if he continues to develop in the second half like he did after he got to May last year. He was absolutely lights out. If he continues that performance this year, they could really have something with him. But the rest of that rotation has a lot of question marks, injuries, young guys, inexperienced there. And if Framber leaves in the offseason next year, who knows what this rotation could really look like. But for you, Willard, I will say that they are a very good team. I'm not saying that they're going to be the favorites to win the series. I'm not going to say they're the favorites to get to the World Series. But I will say I would consider them a lock to make the postseason next year. They are just that good. That model of consistency, even the sum of the parts, I think is going to make up for some of the deficiencies that they have in talent. So, for instance, by trading Kyle Tucker, I think in the aggregate they're going to be better off long term. I think this year they might be a little bit better in certain areas, but they will certainly miss his presence in that lineup. But Astros, I think, will still have a good year there as well. No doubt about that one. David, the only politics I care about is the and we don't give Soto. I agree there. I mean, the Yankees didn't give the presidential suite to Soto, or to his family anyway. There were some issues there with the family as well as security during the year last year with the Yankees. All of those were issues that were off the field for Soto and the Yankees. Ultimately, they played some part in the decision to go to the Mets, I'm sure, but I think the money will always be the preeminent issue for Soto whenever it comes to his contract negotiations. But he signed 15 years, $765. He's got a while to worry about another contract. If he does decide to take the opt-out there, maybe he gets even more money at that point, but he's got a while until he hits free agency once again. Ran Matendo, appreciate you joining us once again. You think a big trade coming for the Dodgers with Brazier DFA'd? Big trade in air quotes. I would say Brazier doesn't qualify as a big trade to me. He was very good in the second half of 23. Injured in the first half of 24. Not a high leverage guy at the end of 24. Gives up 5 runs in 9 innings in the playoffs. He's more of a low leverage reliever with potential to be more. I think he's a middle relief option with upside of being a setup man. He's nowhere near closer at this point. Even MLB trade rumors said that he doesn't expect him to go claimed and might not get traded as well. The only way this would happen is if a team was willing to eat a little bit of the salary, and the Dodgers kind of split the salary here. Maybe you could get a piece back. But MLB trade rumors in that article said that they expected him to actually go to free agency the Dodgers be on the hook for all of it. And then there's two things that could happen. One, he latches on somewhere league minimum for middle relief role. Option number two, he waits to re-sign with them once Shohei Ohtani reaches that 20-game threshold as a both pitcher and hitter, and then we could see him be back with the Los Angeles Dodgers there. But those are all options on the table right now for Ryan Brazier. Rafe, about moving Durant to center field and playing Carter time to time in center field if Tavares does get dealt. I would see that as a possibility. I like the arm of Durant. He played a very good right field when Adolis went down at times due to injury. I think he could hold down a corner outfield spot. Center field, though, I'm not sure if he has the wheels to be able to cover that much ground. I think they might have to go outside of the organization to get somebody for that center field spot. I'm not sure if Durant even makes it to spring training with the team because I think he's probably the most likely guy to go out the door in a Jordan Montgomery trade or another trade for a starting pitcher or a Luis Arraez trade before the start of the season. I think the Rangers are still got their toe in a couple of different pots right now. They're trying to still add a closer. That's one thing I'm kind of paying attention to as we get closer to the start of spring training. Donnie, also Goldie took less to go to the Yankees. I'm not sure how much less we could really say he took from the Yankees. I'm not sure how much value he really had on the open market, but I will say this. It wasn't $30 million. Goldie was declining player last year. He does bring leadership, does bring the pedigree, and you're hoping he recaptures some of that with the Yankees. I think he will, but I'm not sure he was going to make $30 million this year from any other team in the league. Willard, Dodgers are as great. Let's see, as my screen jumps there. Dodgers are as great as their superstar DH Freeman and Betts play for the Dodgers. Once they retire or injured, the Dodgers run will most likely be over. Here's the quick note for you, Willard. Ohtani signed for a very long time. We're talking, you draft a player this year, he might be a free agent before Shohei Ohtani is a free agent again. I mean, that's how long we're talking about them being a contender in the National League just because they got Shohei. Now, of course, they have a whole team around him. Their entire starting rotation now is nothing but aces there. You look at that lineup, Freeman, Betts, they're still adding to it with Teoscar Hernandez, bringing in Michael Conforto. Are they on the level of Shohei Ohtani? Of course not, but it's certainly a more well-rounded team than they have been the last couple of years, and we kind of knew that. The Dodgers were kind of trimming payroll to make the investment there in Shohei. They get that one done, and then they spend, and they're up to, I believe, a $385 million payroll after the Yates signing. They will exceed $400 million once they get Kershaw signed as well. Tim, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. Welcome back, Cruise Control. Woo-wee, welcome back as well. Is anyone interested in Rizzo? I haven't heard too many rumors on him. I have heard a couple of rumors linking him to the Giants. Heard some rumors connecting him to the Mets as a possible Pete Alonso fill-in there. I seriously doubt that would happen, but if it did, would I say it's a great move for the Mets? No, I would not. The last team, of course, is a reunion with the Chicago Cubs. Rafe, does Buxton retire when his current contract ends? Possibly. That boy has been injured so often. He just needs to stay healthy and do right by himself. Buxton has all the talent in the world. He's a guy I think was more talented than Mike Trout at his peak. He just could not stay healthy for the life of him, and that's one player's career that could have been referred to as one of the greatest in the game that just continually gets cut short every single season by injuries. I don't think he's ever lived up to that hype that I had for him anyway. And ultimately, this could be his final deal. Cruise Control, JD Martinez going anywhere? I think he will. He's trying to play in 2025. I'd say teams to kind of keep an eye out for are teams looking for a DH. Teams like the Seattle Mariners that have already been connected to him. Say if they don't bring back Pete Alonso, the Mets could be a fit there. Blue Jays are looking to improve that roster wherever they can get him. If they don't bring in Pete Alonso, maybe there's a fit there. We'll see what happens as far as the outfield mix for Houston, but maybe he decides to hang it up where it all started there in Houston, let Alvarez play the outfield, or he could play left field as well. Would it be a great fit? No, but it'd be a way for them to be unique as far as improving their outfield overall. Donnie, Cashman and Hal has to make a trade for the infield soon. That simple. I'm not sure they have to make a trade. I think they'll go very cheap with a non-roster invitee, kind of like what the Boston Red Sox did with Abraham Toro. I think they're going to go that route, or a short-term deal, like a one-year deal with Jose Iglesias, among other options as well. Woo-wee, how can the Angels get better in the rotation? Simple improvements from within. I would hate to see them kind of clog up that rotation with long-term options like a Jack Flaherty, who they've been connected with. If they were going to sign somebody off the free agent market, I'd be looking for cheap deals. I'd look at, say, at Andrew Heaney that's still hanging out there. Maybe offer him 1 year at, say, $8 million, and then you trade him at the deadline because, again, that spin rate will play. The earned run average, I think, is good enough for a number 5 starter in somebody's rotation, even a playoff caliber rotation. I think he's got the pedigree that of been able to play in a postseason and be successful in that postseason. A lot of experience there with Andrew Heaney. Maybe that'd be a good signing. But again, usually I like to keep it to a 1 year, $2 million deal, 1 year, $4 million deal. Heaney would represent a little bit of a step out here, but a 1 year deal, you could easily trade an $8 million salary. Whereas Kikuchi is making $21, $22 million a year over 3 years, basically making the absolute maximum he could for his salary. And I just don't think that that was the right signing for them. But they're still looking to make another splash. We'll see if they do it. Donnie, you think the Dodgers are trying to trade for Arenado? Again, I'm not ruling them out on pretty much anything at this point. Who can they possibly trade or sign for? For the Angels, again, I just kind of floated out there Andrew Heaney as far as a trade. Maybe taking on bad money. We've floated that one out there several different times. Every single team in the league has a contract I'm sure they would love to get rid of. For the Dodgers, for instance, you got Rojas, you got Taylor. Yankees, you got DJ LeMahieu and Marcus Stroman. Tigers, you of course have Javi Baez. Phillies, you have Castellanos and Taijuan Walker. The list goes on and on and on. Jordan Montgomery for the Arizona Diamondbacks is another one. But that would be one way they could do it. As far as other free agents, Yohan Moncada is another name I would keep out there. With Nick Madrigal, a player that I view very similarly to Yohan Moncada, getting 1 year at $1.3 million with $500,000 in incentives. In that deal, I think that's a very accurate investment there for the Mets. I think Moncada probably gets a little bit more, but I would say the Angels would be a nice fit for him as well. Let's see here. Donnie, and I hope that the Dodgers flip Muncy to the Yankees if they trade for Arenado. They wouldn't. I think they would keep Muncy. He's floated all over the diamond before, and I think he would do it once again. Just change teams, bro. Angels will never do nothing. You're destined for heartbreak for the next 10 years. That's a tough one there, Rafe. I would say they're at least destined for heartbreak for at least the next 3 years, and that's assuming they hit it right with all their draft picks, or at least the majority of them get a superstar or two out of that group. They invest well in the international bonus pool. Those kinds of things are very important right now for the Angels. They make the right trades, bring back the right prospects in trade, sell off all their guys that are on 1 year deals at the deadline. 7th inning reliever, 6th inning reliever, closer, your catcher, whoever might be up on an expiring deal. You need to flip those assets for future ones. And that would be the way I would be going about a rebuild process there with the Angels. But we'll see what they do. As far as, being a fan of the Angels, sometimes you just have to ride through those tough times. I mean, I've covered I've watched the Rangers pretty much my entire life. I watched the Cowboys ever since I moved to Texas. I watched the Dallas Mavericks basically since the start of Dirk Nowitzki's career until now. Every single franchise I've followed has had its up moments and its downs. Dirk had that tough stretch after he won the series or won the finals anyway. When they were just trying to figure out what they wanted to do as an organization, they decided not to keep the guys around for years to come, and they go with Chris Kaman at one point. They go with Monte Ellis at one point, O.J. Mayo. Every team goes through ups and downs of their cycle here, and it's just the way things are for the Angels. Now, it might be a more prolonged time for them to get back to relevancy because of how they ultimately ended the Shohei Ohtani era, but there is still a pathway for them to get back to success. Rod, if the Jays miss out on Alonso and Bregman, do they trade for Arenado? No. I think they're trying to invest in talent in free agency. I think the one trade route they might go is for a starting pitcher. I know they've been connected to Dylan Cease, but again, I still think they're going to try to go free agency more than anything else at this moment. Rafe, every contract seems small after the Soto one. It does, but they're still huge. Look at the relief contracts alone. Look at Jorge Polanco's contract that he just signed. That's ridiculous money for a player of his caliber. He once was worth that. He was once worth much more than that. Nowadays, I wouldn't sign him unless I absolutely needed some major league base level improvement there. And that's really the only thing you can count on him for right now. So we'll see what he ultimately looks like there. Donnie, Rafe, the Soto signing with the Mets wasn't a surprise, and Hal did everything he could to bring Soto back, especially at 16 for $60 million contract, $60 million signing bonus. I mean, yeah, but the Soto contract, I think his bigger point there is that it was so huge. All these smaller deals that we're seeing, even for big money, like, say, Michael Conforto getting the contract that he got, Teoscar Hernandez, that contract, even the Bregman deal, all dwarf in the comparison there to in comparison to Juan Soto. Hank, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. No matter what, there's always an upside. Sports Network. Appreciate you, Hank. Thank you for joining us once again. Rafe, Royals pushed for Santander, yet he chose the Rays. Royals got a better playoff hope than the Jays, in my opinion. Yes and no. I think the Royals are in a good spot for a wild card. They're a very competitive team in that regard. Same thing for the division. I think they're going to be right there with the Guardians and Tigers all the way up until the final week of the season. But to say that the Jays are not going to be in that same conversation for a wild card, I think this season is beginning to look a little bit more likely by the day, with the signing of Santander, bringing in Hoffman, bringing in Jimenez, bringing in Max Scherzer, and I still think they're going to add at least one, maybe two more major leaguers to this roster. I think this is a team that could get to a wild card. Do I consider them a favorite for the World Series in any respect? Absolutely not. But I will say that it was interesting that the Royals were there. But look at the money. It was $60 million and change, I believe, from the Royals. Might have been straight up, might have had deferrals, I don't know. But the contract that he signed with the Blue Jays had, I believe, $61 million in deferrals, but the value itself was in that $90 million category with an option and incentives that could take it to 6 years for 110. I would say he took the better deal out of the two. Sorry, Angels, it's going to be a rough ride. Yes, it is. I mean, the Rangers had that period of time as well when they were, post Alex Rodriguez, even during Alex Rodriguez's tenure there. But at least you had something to go to the ballpark for and at least hope something good would happen. I remember some of those crazy A-Rod performances there with the Rangers, some of the 50 home run seasons there. He was great, but the team itself was not very good around him. The pitching was not there. The team could not add anybody else in free agency after bringing him in. That's why they had to trade him to the Yankees, and ultimately that proved to be one of the many poor decisions they made at that time. But, horrible contracts are a part of the sport anyway, but we'll see what happens here. Rafe, so it's basically trade the whole team instead of signing players to horrible contracts that don't even care about baseball. Let's see here. For me, again, just rebuilding a roster, you have to start from the ground up. You have to draft well. You have to sign guys in international free agency that are going to be an impact piece for you going forward. And then you have to make wise investments in free agency. Go after veterans who have some type of a role that you can sign for cheap contracts. And if things work out, great. You can flip them at the deadline. If they don't, you can cut them at the trade deadline and then let the young guys play in the second half of the year so you can get a higher draft pick as well. Got to play these games. It's not necessarily tanking, but you're trying to improve your team for the future. You're not necessarily worried on the day-to-day. You're focused on the quote-unquote process, ever so famous by the Philadelphia 76ers, but you're focusing on doing the things correctly, making the right decisions internally so you can have greater success in the future. Got to have those right systems in place, otherwise it's just never going to work. But for me, you sign low-cost deals, you sign a bunch of veteran bullpen arms. Half of them might make the team out of spring training. Half of those guys might have good years. You trade those guys. The other guys ultimately move to the back end of the bullpen when those guys are traded, and then you bring up the young guys in the second half. But again, that's just how I would build a roster if I were in a rebuilding situation. Rand, I think Toronto will have a relatively injury-free season. It's been a while, and be back to MVP form. Also been a while. Angels may surprise. That division is weak. I don't think they're going to surprise anybody. I'll put it this way. I think the surprise for the Angels would be if they could catch the Mariners for third place. I think the Rangers and Astros have kind of ran away and hid with this division unless the Mariners add some offense. I like what the A's have done. I think their pitching is still a little bit of a question mark, but they're a much more improved team than the Angels. Angels, to me, this should be a team that should be going fully into a rebuild mode, not trying to short-circuit it by spending in free agency, bringing in a Santander, bringing in a Pete Alonso, or an Alex Bregman, or any of the other big names they've been connected to. That is not the way we've seen has been very successful. That's just how you get more mediocrity and how you miss the playoffs for umpteen years when you have arguably two of the greatest players on the planet in Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani on the same roster. Both of those guys were in the top three of the sport anyway for a period of time while they were there with the Angels, and ultimately they couldn't sniff the postseason. You're saying with the additions they've made so far, the improvements they've made within their prospects that have already played on the big league roster, Zach Neto, Shanuel, etc., that just bringing in Pete Alonso is all of a sudden going to make them a better team than when they had the second and third best players in the entire sport, and Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani at the peak of their powers? Please. I just don't see that happening. I think Angels fans are kind of kidding themselves. Now, could they still have a good year? Absolutely. They've certainly raised the floor of some of their pitchers there. No matter how much I don't like the Kikuchi signing, he's at least a solid 4 to me in somebody's rotation, and he would at least give them some innings in that rotation as well. Just something to kind of keep an eye there with the Los Angeles Angels there. Let's go ahead and kind of check out a couple more of these comments here before we wrap up for the evening. That's part of the new sobriety test pronounce Shohei Ohtani's replaced the saying alphabet backwards. I don't know about that. Shohei Ohtani is a fairly easy name to say. Now, Giannis Antetokounmpo, that's a little bit tougher. Or even trying to spell that one would be a lot more difficult. Rangers, Astros, Mariners, weak. You disagree? Astros, to me, they're certainly a weaker team than they have been in the past, but I still think they have the pedigree to be a very competitive team, and I like the young guys they're bringing in, but there are question marks there. Rangers, question marks with the offense, but they've certainly done their best to address those. Certainly done a nice job addressing the bullpen. I think they'll still add one more piece to that bullpen in a closer. The rotation, you got to have question marks about DeGrom and the young guys there and some of the injury risk there with Molly. But they certainly have the arms that, at least the quantity of arms, to be able to weather some injury risks there as well, or poor performance. Now, of course, they still may be looking for another innings eater there as well, but to me, I still think they're in a good position at the top of that division. Mariners, to me, have a great rotation, great bullpen, but that lineup certainly leaves a lot to be desired. Solano was a nice piece for them, but they still need more work. Rafe, you think the Jays have a wild card spot, but as far as a legit threat, I think the Royals are scarier. I wouldn't say that the Blue Jays have locked up a wild card. When you're talking about the wild card, you're talking about teams that are in that division, for instance. Say the Yankees win, just to kind of put that one on paper. Then you're talking about the Orioles, Red Sox, and Rays within your own division. That's 3 teams competing for a wild card. Let's go ahead and say chalk. The Guardians win the division again. We'll say the Royals are going to be in that wild card hunt. You're going to have the Tigers in the wild card hunt as well. I don't think the Twins will be in that division, or the White Sox, obviously. And then you get to the AL West. Say the Rangers win the division, or the Astros win the division. One of those two would be in that wild card hunt, and then the Mariners, I think, would be in that conversation as well. I think any of those teams could make a case to be a wild card team this year, and you don't know how it's going to play out until you get it on the field. But we'll see. But I would say the Royals are certainly a good team. I like the additions they've made so far this offseason. Love the addition of Estevez. Got some details on his contract. 2 years for $22.2 million. Just beats the deal that A.J. Minter signed with the New York Mets. There were some rumblings that the Mets would be looking for some bullpen help there, and several reporters have come out and said basically they don't think the money is there. The only thing they might spend the money on and go well past the Steve Cohen tax is for Pete Alonso, if they're able to come to an agreement that would work for them. Hank, baseball is so fun. Who's going to be this year's surprise team? Tigers last year. I would say a surprise team. I'm not sure how much surprises there are. I mean, I've covered the sport this whole offseason really well. I kind of give my props to the AL East. You know, the teams have really improved there. But as far as a surprise, maybe the Reds in the Central. It's tough to say a surprise because all of them, to me, have a legitimate case that I've already mentioned as far as getting to a wild card spot. As far as making a run, now that would be a tougher, more realistic guess that I could make here. Teams that are expected to make a run already are the Yankees on the AL side, the Orioles if they get a number 1, the Dodgers on the NL side, and then, of course, the Mets, Phillies are in that conversation. But a team that could make a run that nobody's talking about is the Arizona Diamondbacks because of that starting pitching. If all it takes is get a couple of starting pitchers, throw gems in the postseason, the other team doesn't throw as good of a gem, and ultimately the Dodgers could be bounced by a team like the Diamondbacks because of how that starting rotation is built. Now, would I say that the Dodgers rotation is better? Absolutely. But all it takes is just to have one rough outing, small sample size is all it takes, and then you're out of the postseason. Could happen. You know, the Dodgers have had that experience already a few different times over the last 5 years. You know, they're on paper the best team in the entire league, but they could easily be bounced by a team like Arizona if that rotation does what I think it's capable of doing in a short series. Let's see here. Rafe, I feel like since I was a kid, the Angels always gave up legit competition without being a dominant team. They always compete and just always don't win the majority. Okay, so kind of cleaning up that comment there. The Angels were a very competitive team. Mike Scioscia there was one of the great managers they had for a very long time. Even when they didn't have the best talent, they were always very effective. They had a brand of baseball that just was conducive to winning. And ultimately, they decided to move on. They decided the Scioscia era was over, and now I've kind of transitioned right after that into the Trout and Ohtani years, and then we get to the era that we're in now, which is just a complete and total rebuild. First time in a very long time for the Angels, so good on them for not getting to this point for a very long time. Hank, you fell in love with baseball and the Rangers when they sucked. I still can't believe we won and we are good, and I predict a playoff Rangers team. I would agree. I think the Rangers return to the playoffs. I'm curious to see what noise they make once they get there and who they ultimately trade for at the deadline. Because if they're in contention, I do think Ray Davis and the GM of the GM Fenstermaker and the president of baseball ops in Chris Young will be very aggressive at the deadline. Rafe, I just want to see a 108 win Rangers team followed by 2 more 100 win seasons. Dude, I would love that. But 100 win seasons in the entire league are very rare. I think the American League is fairly competitive, even though it's not necessarily as good at the top with the Dodgers on the NL side. But I would say the American League is more wide open, and because of that, I think the American League might not have very many 100-game winners, if any at all. On the National League side, I think the Dodgers will be a 100-game winner. I think the Mets have a case that they could be in there, but they're in a tough division. Could be difficult for any team besides the Dodgers to win 100 games this year. After all, no team did this year. You predict the Reds as a surprise. Yeah, Reds as a surprise team. It's kind of my thought process there too. I'm not sure how much of a surprise they would do. I don't think they're going to win the division. I don't think they're going to win, in the postseason. But if they do surprise, say they win the division or win a wild card spot, I don't think they're advancing to the World Series. I'll put it that way. Let's see here. I agree with Rafe, but it's a safe choice. Yes. I think they could try. I think they could try. Bleh. I think they could very easily hit a wall, but we will see. Angels went from must-watch baseball to irrelevant. Sad fall. True. That's asking a lot. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Let's head over to X and see if anything is happening this evening. See if Bregman is signed already while we've been live. That'd be pretty awesome. The Mets rumors already kicking off about JD Martinez possibly returning. We mentioned that one earlier in the video, and boom, there's the article there. Let's head over to MLB trade rumors, see if anything is going on there. Giants are MLB trade rumors are saying they should make the case to continue to add this offseason. Nothing really happening there. Again, Bregman was offered the 6-year deal with an opt-out after the first year from another team. That was our top story tonight. Rangers have gotten trade interest in Leody Taveras. Not too surprising there because, again, he's a good defensive center fielder, and it would save the Rangers a little bit of money, allowing them to add another starting pitcher. Maybe there's even a return for Andrew Heaney in the works here if he ultimately only gets a 1-year deal. I mean, he did pitch very well for the Rangers last year. The record was only 5-14. But when you look at the numbers, spin rate was still there. Strikeout numbers were still there. He's always been a little bit inconsistent from start to start, but when he's on, he is lights out. Strikeout rate, all that kind of stuff the Rangers do like, he is very good at all those. And if he only signs a 1-year deal, I was expecting him to sign, say, a 1-year $15 million deal at the start of free agency, maybe a 2 for $25, 2 for $30 million deal. I don't think he gets that at this point. I think for Andrew Heaney, you're looking something in the range of, say, 1 year, $8 to $12 million on a 1-year deal. Maybe you go 2 years at $20 million, but I doubt it at this point. I think he's destined for a 1-year deal. Let's see here. See if they mention any specific teams. They're just talking about the thresholds and what the Rangers would be willing to do. Guardians, we mentioned that one, were one that could be a fit there. They had 9 different center fielders last year. Here's a few other teams. Giants, Royals, and Angels are other teams that are looking for some center field help. Of that group, maybe the Royals would be the only one because they're looking for more speed and defense. Offense would be the tricky part there if that would be enough of an upgrade for them in center for them to make the move there. Giants, I'm not sure how much Taveras would really help them. I think they have a good outfield mix there as well. They got a guy coming back from injury that they just signed to a $100 million deal last year. I'm not sure if Taveras would be the right fit for them. And then, of course, the Angels. I mean, if he resurrects his bat and has a great first half, maybe you parlay him into a trade, or maybe he could be a fit for you long term. But they already have Mickey Moniak out there. I'm not sure they really need to make this type of a move. I'd rather spend the money doing something else rather than trading prospects or some type of impactful piece to the Angels' several years into the future, bright future, than bringing in Taveras at this point. But that's kind of the latest news at this moment. Did the Mets get Pete? They did not yet, but they're certainly discussing it. There is some discussion among national media members that they believe the Mets have been posturing this whole time. And again, the Mets have raised their offer twice already this week. Remember, it started out at 3 for 62, then it went to 3 for 66, and now it's up to 3 for 70. There is some belief that they could be getting into that $80 million range, which would be a lot closer to what Alonso was looking for. If they can get close enough on a middle ground, maybe they get a deal done there. But again, Blue Jays are the team for me outside of the Mets that I'd keep an eye on. Reds are another popular pick among national media types. I don't necessarily see it as much of a slam dunk. I think it's very much a long shot there. And then, of course, the Los Angeles Angels, if they make the quote-unquote big splashy type of a move there. If Bregman signed during the live, would you know from the chat? I'm sure I would. I'm sure I would. You want Boras on the Yankees? I think he would have been a good fit for them, but to me, he doubles a lot with Trent Grisham as far as what he brings to the club. I'm not sure how much of a different type of a player they would have if they acquired him. Now, if they moved on from Grisham, then yes, I would say that'd be a great fit. But I don't think so at this moment. I think if the Mets didn't bring in Jose Siri, I would have said the Mets as well. Alrighty, appreciate you guys joining us. We'll get into some trade talk hopefully tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll get Bregman signing as well. Again, we're going to be having a very late live tomorrow night, so be sure to join us probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock tomorrow, just like this one here. But appreciate you guys joining us late tonight. Really do appreciate all your support, all your kind words, the likes on the video, the subscribes. Right now, we got like 50 people in here. Got like 30 likes on the video on a live that we started after 11 o'clock Central Time. Absolutely great response from you guys joining us here and being a part of the Upside. Remember, we're going to have all coverage every single night from the MLB Hot Stove throughout the entire spring training and throughout the regular season as well. So if you love the MLB, if you enjoy talking trades, talking about the different news of the day, be sure to hit that like and subscribe and join us every single night as we cover your favorite sport, Major League Baseball. But y'all have a great evening out there. Hopefully y'all have a safe Saturday. A lot of craziness happening in the world right now, so wish all you guys nothing but the best, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow night. Y'all have a great one.